Hello, welcome everybody. This is Dr. Duncan and Queen Carmel Brown. We are back for another episode of Mahogany Thoughts. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. It's really important to talk about boundaries. It's been a little gap from this one recording to another, but prior to us hopping on the show, we have just talked about how busy we really have been as of late. But we're here now, so that's all that matters. And Carmel, Queen Carmel, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Thanks for asking. Thanks for joining in, everybody. We're looking forward to talking to you about boundaries today. I think we have a lot to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's going on in your world? For those who are not following you on the social, just a little bit what's going on with your world for the past 30 days or so.
Well, there's been a lot going on. In fact, as far as social goes, even if you are following me, I haven't even been on there that much lately because I have been so busy, mostly doing mental health in the workplace, corporate America type of trainings and critical incidents, things like that. Of course, seeing clients. Outside of that, just trying to make sure that I'm taking care of thyself in the process of all of the busyness. This year kind of came in with a big bang, and it's been nonstop ever since. As you and I were saying before we started recording, it's a great thing, but sometimes it becomes unmanageable almost at times. So we have to make sure that we maintain that balance, which is why boundaries are important.
Are very important. And same thing here. For those who have followed on social and who have not, I've been all over the place. And, that's been part of my plan going into 2023. You may recall in a previous episode, I said I don't necessarily have resolutions, but I do try to set goals to accomplish throughout the year. One of them was to expand and increase my reach of networking, because that's how a lot of opportunities can come out by being organic. And so on social media, there might be people who be interested on what you're displaying based on certain algorithms. Whereas when you're face to face with individuals and you're working in a room, you'll be amazed the type of level of connection that you may have, or even, future leads. So that's something I've been doing a lot, especially throughout the month of February. And so now it's March Madness month. So for those who know me, these next couple of Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, I'll be glued from a television from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., maybe a little bit later, depending on when the games end. And if you are texting me, hopefully it's going to be a short text conversation, because if it's not about the game, I'm not interested. So it's my favorite time of the year. My team is not in it. North Carolina Tar Heels, they was at a championship last year. I went to the game. They're not in a game this year. They're not even playing NIT. I'm mad at them right now just for the way that they played down the stretch. So I'm going to call them bums. And so at least that's recorded and stuff. You guys were bums this year. Still love you, but you played like bums especially near the end of the season. So hopefully we'll get it together next year. But that's the life of a sports fan. You get so wrapped up with them sometimes that you just kind of go through the highs and lows. So it was just really disappointing to watch them. But I'm still going to be 100%, 1,000% glued into not only the men's NCAA tournament, but also I'll be watching the women's NCAA tournament, because I definitely love the different style of play between the two groups. And also it just seems like it's more technical, with the women's group than it is with the men, as far as the style of play, speed, and defense. So looking forward to that. But outside of that, nothing else has been going on in particular, but we wanted to make sure that we're still recording. And, I know it hasn't been as frequent as it has been at times past, but we first started during the pandemic, and it's not really making an excuse, but it's just the reality. We all have different responsibilities and obligations, and the very first responsibility and obligation is to us and our families, and our career and our profession. So we have, obviously there's a transition of sorts, and but boundaries is a good topic to use for today, and so we're going to talk about that. And so, Carmel, I know you haven't been on social media a lot, but I don't know if it's just you or myself, but it seems like that you're seeing an increase of individuals, professing or just, proudly proclaiming how they're going to cut people off or whatever the case may be, and using the words boundaries as as a phrase, that's very familiar for myself personally. And I've said this a million times. For me personally, I don't use I have my boundaries in certain ways, but as far as the human interaction, I am not one to cut somebody off. I may not, fool with somebody in a particular type of way, but I think that, going to the extremes and not, responding to certain text messages, phone calls, or whatever the case may be, that's just not my style. But, to each their own. So have you seen, like the way I've seen it on my social media, a lot of discussion about boundaries and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, on an ongoing basis. And I think the words that people typically use is my cutoff game is strong. I've heard people say things like that, that's what they do. They believe that this is something that's important. And here's the thing. I I really caution people when it comes to that, cutting people off so rapidly. Of course, there is a need for that at certain times, but I think a lot of people do that prematurely and they sometimes don't have the conflict resolution skills that they need to resolve whatever it is or deal with whatever it is that's going on between that and that person, them and that person. And I think that as adults, we have to learn how to communicate with each other and learn to say, you know what, you hurt my feelings, or I was offended by that. And we need to talk about something instead of just cutting people off, because in this day and time, in case we haven't noticed, we need other people. And people are going to offend you. They're going to upset you. They're going to ruffle your feathers every now and then. And I think it's important for us to remember that that's okay. That's human. I don't care if it's your closest relationships or your most distant relationships. If you've been married for any amount of time, your spouse has upset you, offended you in some way, has made you angry, and but you can't cut them off. Obviously, that's your. Well, I guess you could. Some people do, but you know what I mean. We haven't cut our spouses off, Dr. Duncan, so I think we're good.
Yes.
But but I'm sure they've had their moments with us. That's human. You're going to have moments with your children. You're going to have moments with your parents, and you're certainly going to have moments with your friends. And so just learning how to say, okay, so we had a moment here. Let's regroup and figure out what went wrong and how we can do something different later on. And I think we have to remember too, when it comes to boundaries, it's not just about de-escalating or shutting down a situation. Boundaries are good for preventing situations from occurring.
Yes. And I think that and it's really interesting too. It's not so much of the fact that people are committing boundaries or saying boundaries. It's interesting you said that about the spouses, but it's really more about the eternal family, the immediate family dynamic. I'm starting to see that a lot more, whether I experienced it personally or observed it, as a friend or even as a distant family member. Dynamic. It's just really interesting and stuff. The level of ferocity when it comes to family members cutting each other off. And I just think that's very interesting because of the fact that we as African Americans, our families were all that we had. Growing up, and maybe we don't experience it to the extreme as our elders had, but that was the thing. Thanksgiving, Easter, different major holidays where we would come together and we would fellowship, and even by extension, even with the church, when you go to church, you have your fellowships and things of that nature, and it's just really interesting and stuff. Like as we continue to go through more years through life and stuff, it's just really intriguing, especially individuals our age who are very quick to cut people off, and sincerely do try to cut people off and try to reestablish new relationships with people or whatever the case may be, to help compensate for that. But yeah, I just thought that was just really, I just think it's just really unique in that regards because of the fact that it seems like that you're burning more energy to ignore or not to engage somebody, rather than trying to come to a uniport of reconciliation or just even reestablish a new baseline.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need a pause. You just need a break. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you have to cut people off long term, permanently, or indefinitely. It sometimes it's just what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for me. What makes me feel comfortable and uncomfortable, and it's really for emotional and mental stability. Boundaries, and I think sometimes we use boundaries as a way to hurt other people, and that's not what boundaries are. That's something else. I don't even know what you want to call that, but I think that as a culture we have abused that word and not necessarily knowing what we're saying.
I think so. It's kind of funny that you said as a culture we use or abuse that word. It kind of is almost like some of the other words that we've used over the last couple of years or what we have seen, such as generational wealth and setting a legacy. And it's really funny how you don't see those words coming up as much anymore. One thing, remember in 2000, especially during the pandemic, everybody and their mother wanted to rush to be an entrepreneur. And so, the same people that were, on social media talking about how they're going to do this to build their families or build their legacy for the wealth or whatever the case may be. It's just interesting to see that less and less people are doing it. And there's nothing wrong walking away from something that's not working. But, I do agree. I think it's a little bit cliche just to say, hey, I'm establishing my boundaries. And so we wanted to kind of talk that from a very therapeutic perspective. So this is, I'm not a mental health expert. I say that many a times. I'm around a bunch of mental health experts, but I always feel like it's appropriate to defer to their expert opinion because they do give advice in dealing with complex situations and complicated people. And so one of the things that I could ask you for for your opinion is, what do you do when somebody is hard of hearing? Meaning that you can have a conversation, have a dialogue with an individual, but that person is not ever receptive to anything that you're saying. How would you be able to address those type of situations?
Well, acceptance is powerful. Knowing who you're dealing with, what you're probably not going to accomplish with that person. And we have to remember that we're not responsible for their response or their adherence to the boundaries that we're trying to set or the conversations that we're having. We're only responsible for delivering that message to them as it relates to us. And they get to decide what they do with that information. If they are on board with whatever it is that we're communicating to them that we need in the relationship. And at that point, we have a choice to make for ourselves. And we can also respect that they're not adhering to whatever it is that we're asking for, but respecting that and saying, okay, well then, if this is where we are and I'm not getting the receptiveness or the response that I'd like to have from this person, then you create some distance so that your emotional well-being and mental stability isn't affected negatively by that person's behavior or by that person's inability to maintain those boundaries or respect those boundaries.
So when you're saying maintain distance, can you go into a little bit more detail as to, or some examples or recommendations that individuals can do to maintain or to create and maintain a distance for a certain point where it's safe for them emotionally, mentally to reengage?
Yeah, well, it's different for everybody. It really depends on what your values are, because our boundaries are set on our personal values. And so for some people, that distance is going to be more of an emotional nature, that when we are talking to that person or whenever we're in close proximity, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to be around that person or talk to them. But whenever we are with that person and they start to say things or they start to behave in a way that's a trigger for us, or we notice that we're having an emotional response that we don't necessarily like or that's all too familiar, then you start to say, okay, well, I'm going to get off the phone and I'll talk to you later. Love you, that type of thing. If it's, a close family member, knowing when to turn the switch off so that it doesn't get out of control for some people, or if you're at a family gathering, when you're noticing that behavior creep back in and you're noticing your emotional response, being able to determine, is this a situation that could get out of control? And is this a place and a space that's going to trigger some things that's going to cause me to get out of character in a time and space that I don't want to? And so being able to remove yourself in that situation. And sometimes that's just going to another room. Sometimes it's leaving the location altogether, but it doesn't mean that you're ending the relationship. And over time, they get it. They start to get how you respond to that you don't get in the ring with them and that they're not pulling you into that dynamic, the negativity and such. And that when they start to behave and speak a certain way, that you actually remove yourself. And over time, they will adhere. So, but it'll happen on their own time or in their own time. And for some people, it's depending on what's happening, you're not going to be around that person. If it's really unsafe, possibly even dangerous for some people, you're just not going to be in the same space with that person. You can love people from afar. And loving people sometimes and accepting people sometimes isn't necessarily interacting with them. It's respecting them, valuing them as a human being, but knowing that either you or them or both parties are not able to coexist in a healthy manner right now.
That's really powerful information right there. Being able to be cognizant and be mindful of saying, hey, this is something that's making me feel a certain type of way. I need to remove myself from it, instead of acquiescing to the situation and continue to engage in that behavior, to the point and stuff where it actually does more harm than good. And so, based on that, you obviously have to have a history, with the individual to get to that particular point. If it is a family member or a very, very close friend or acquaintance. So, people do have the capacity to change. And, some people may do change, very rapidly, and sometimes they may do it incrementally. But, how important is hanging on to the past of somebody's behavior, or, interactions, past conflicts? I mean, how important is that, for, I guess, establishing or creating boundaries in the future? So like if you had and you haven't had a tiff in 2, 3 years, and then, for whatever reason you do have a disagreement, how prescient is it to use that past, as a weapon, or not a weapon, but to use it as a foundation to deal with the individual in a current situation?
Well, it's really going to depend on the severity or the extent to which those disagreements have occurred. Of course, you talked about time frame and frequency, but we also have to talk about the intensity of it.
Mm,
Even though it was 3 years ago, how bad was it? So it's really going to depend on that. Is it somebody that that right away, as soon as this person starts to behave one way, or for some people, it's this person is this way whenever they're drinking alcohol. And so if you go to an event or a gathering and that person is drinking, you know what's going to happen more than likely. And so you start to prepare yourself to protect yourself in that situation. One thing I always tell people is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And it doesn't mean that people don't change, because they absolutely do. People grow and change all the time. However, based on history, for the most part what people are capable of. And so it's important that you arm yourself with that information and decide what you're going to do to protect yourself. And sometimes you're protecting them by protecting yourself, knowing that you're not going to allow things to get out of line, because when that person starts to drink, or when they get around certain people, maybe there's a crowd or an individual that's a trigger for them, or maybe they need an audience to be around before they start to behave a certain way. And you know that if they're around these people, they're going to behave this way. Maybe it's not alcohol, maybe it's the audience, the other A.
yes, yes,
And
the
so,
audience.
yeah, absolutely. So it really depends. Frequency and intensity are certainly factors.
Sure. And then I guess when it comes down to it, the power of the apology, right? So when people do apologize, or sometimes it gets to in a situation where one person is apologizing, the other person doesn't, or rarely does at all. How do you move forward in those type of disagreements?
Well, some people don't apologize in a way that you do. It may not be a traditional "I'm sorry." Some people apologize with their behavior. So we have to make sure that we're not looking for someone to interact the way we do. Because some people say that they're sorry, but their behavior doesn't say that.
Absolutely. And so, what are your recommendations moving forward then? So for individuals who may be struggling with, various periods of conflict, and not really fully understanding the reason why the conflicts may exist. Like I said, we said before going onto the call or this particular recording that, there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of stressors and a lot of factors that are not known, and may not be articulated, that could be underlying conditions to be brought into those conflicts. So, moving forward, what are the recommendations you may have for individuals, moving forward, who may feel like that they've been mired in conflict, consistently over time?
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? Because I don't think I quite understood what you were asking.
So I guess like moving forward. So like let's say that, for people who feel like they're in it. So I guess really let me rephrase it like this. People are saying that they want to create their boundaries and want to create their peace or whatever the case may be, but they're having these repetitive, conflict points, points of confliction. So what recommendations would you suggest for that individual or individuals who may find themselves as always getting into these clashes, these personality clashes and conflicts, but the basis of it are basically the same?
With different people?
Yeah, it can be
Are
different
they
people,
getting
same
into?
people. It's just or
Okay.
just a general. I'm just saying. So like I'm thinking, and so when I have a lot of these conversations, such as this, I pull out from either personal or I may pull out from just, conversations or just observations. And so that particular question actually deals with just the whole wide gamut of it and stuff, just kind of just through observation, like, okay, so and so may feel, this person may feel a certain type of way when these issues happen, but these issues are repetitive, right? So how would that individual be able to deal with conflict moving forward, or preparing us, or just even, self-recognition as to dealing with the conflict?
Yeah, if you're always having conflict with other people, whether it's a variety of people or the same person, then you definitely have to look in the mirror. You definitely need to do some self-evaluating to determine if you're dealing with either some type of a mood disorder or a personality disorder, or maybe you just don't communicate well with other people, or maybe you don't have a good handle on emotional regulation. And that's something that you can go to a professional for, see a therapist. And it doesn't matter if it's a matter of emotional regulation or poor ability to problem solve or resolve conflict, or there's some type of a personality disorder, any of those things, communication as well. You can see someone, and it doesn't even have to be a licensed therapist. Sometimes with some of those things, not emotional regulation and all those clinical things, but some things like communication, you could even see a coach for. But
Mm.
know when it's time to get help, because if you're always having conflict, you're suffering to some degree, because ongoing conflict isn't fun for anyone. There's some internal turmoil that's occurring with that, either before the conflict occurs or on an ongoing basis, or once the conflict starts. And if that's happening all the time, that's exhausting. And you need to figure out what's fueling that fire all the time.
So you were saying a coach. You're saying it may not necessarily be a therapist, but a coach. So how would you be able to identify a coach that could be able to help you on that? Does it have to be somebody that's a professional per se, or a mentor, or a close relationship with an individual?
I am all about making sure you're seeking out qualified individuals to provide whatever the service is that you're looking for. However, I think there are times when a mentor or just somebody that you know personally, or maybe they're a member of your church, or maybe it's a senior person at your job that you really respect, and you like how they operate and how they handle conflict, and you like how they interact with other people. You think they have a good handle on emotional regulation, and you'd like to know how they do it, how they handle people the way that they do. It's okay to ask them for help as well if you don't want to see a therapist. However, if there is an emotional regulation issue or a potential personality disorder, which those things you need to go to a licensed clinician in order to get a proper diagnosis. Don't diagnose yourself or allow someone that's not qualified to diagnose you. Those
Yes.
are things you need to get professional help for. Then those are things you can get treatment for. That's not something a coach is going to be able to help out with, or a mentor.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's some really good points. And then I guess also too, from your qualified opinion, like I said, the stressors, right? So there's a lot of people that's dealing with a lot of stressors. It could be something doing with their job, it could be with their family, it could be with their business, it could be just waking up on the wrong side of the bed, medication. How can that person better prepare themselves to go in through the ins and outs of the day? Not the person who may be dealing with some of the stressors in life. How should they engage other people? Like, what are the warning signs they should probably keep an eye of themselves before wading into a river of conflict?
Well, is it impacting really important or critical areas of your life? If your ability to manage your daily stressors is preventing you from doing really important things, or hindering some major area in life, that's a sign that you may need to either talk to someone, or there needs to be some major or significant intervention. When I say major areas of life, I mean, is it impacting your interpersonal relationships? Is it impacting your ability to perform on the job? Is it impacting your overall emotional state, or mental health? Are you not able to sleep well at night? Is your mood low frequently? Are you anxious or emotionally uncomfortable to some degree most of the time? How is it impacting you?
Stuff, Queen Carmel. You on a roll today. Appreciate
And
that.
you didn't even tell me what you were asking me. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, no, I'm just, it's just more of a free flowing conversation
I
today.
like it. No, it's good. It's
Yeah,
good. It's not, it doesn't need to be scripted. But no, these are really good questions, and it's stuff that we should be talking about, because I think some people, a lot of people, just because they're adults, believe that they are able to manage their emotions. Here's the thing. When it comes to emotions, a lot of the times when it comes to conflict, that's usually the biggest culprit with all of that. A lot of people don't know how to manage what they're feeling. And so their behavioral response is based on their emotional response to whatever the stimulus is, whatever the event or the triggering event was. So it's important for us to remember that we've got to keep those things intact. And just because you're an adult, that doesn't mean that you do a good job of managing those things. And it's okay to just say, I'm a human being, I'm imperfect. There's some areas, we all have areas that we need to improve or tighten up on. So
Kind of reminds me of something I always say, we often try to strive for perfection on that will never be perfect. And so, things don't always go according to plan. And, certain conversations may not end the way that we want, or may not get the response that we're looking for. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth the effort to try. And I think that, that to make mistakes is to be human, and that, every mistake does not have to be catastrophic, and nor does every level of conflict have to be the end of it, as long as it's nobody's physically harming you or anything of that nature. But when you get into heated discussions, most of the time when you start communicating and two people are emotional, the reality is and stuff is that um you're going to more likely say or behave in a manner that's not going to be consistent with who you are as a person. So, I always find that kind of interesting and stuff when it comes to conflict and stuff that, when you do get your emotions involved, whether it's through face to face or a call or through a text message, the moment that you start throwing emotions out in the midst of the conversation, I don't think that there's ever been too many conversations say, you know what, Carmel, I think you're right. You know what I
mhm.
mean? It's just
Yeah,
that when you're
yeah.
when you're doing that, I mean, people are become, I think it's safe to say, and I'm not a therapist, but I think it's safe to say that when you are critiquing somebody or whatever the case may be and stuff, or bringing up, things that happen from, 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 100 years ago, I don't think it's fair to the other person, especially if you're looking at that particular, issue at that time. But also you have to realize the stuff that people do make mistakes. But, what does the whole body of work really dictate? I think that's more important than anything else.
For sure.
So is there anything else would you like to add, Queen Carmel?
No. I think that it's important for everybody to remember that setting boundaries is a life skill.
It is. It is. And conflict is inevitable. I mean, that's the thing about it. I think that, that's what I was meaning to say earlier, that, going into this discussion, this is not about, um, you know, we're never in conflict. I mean, I stay in conflict sometimes. But it's, and I say that in jest, but conflict is inevitable. I mean, I think that you're involved with people over a period of time. The conflict's going to be at times very intense, and it's just realize that it's inevitable. I mean, you're not going to have if you're, I think for me personally, I think that if you're kumbaya with somebody over and over and over again, then I think it becomes a little bit more artificial. And I just think that there's some issues that's bubbling that's yet to be addressed and stuff. So if you are listening to this podcast, and you feel like that you're just having a period of time in your life when things are not going your way or whatever with the individual or individuals, just know that it's temporary, right? And that it's temporary as long as you make it temporary. But the moment that you do decide to go ahead and, wipe people off the face of your phone, or whatever, social media or whatever the case may be, then you're actually adding another layer of conflict, because of the fact that it takes a lot more energy to withhold yourself, in a negative fashion, towards another individual than it does to try to address the problem, head on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us before we finish up today too to talk about just real briefly who is it typically the most difficult to set boundaries with and to maintain boundaries with, because there are certain people that it's kind of a lot more difficult to set boundaries with and maintain boundaries with than the average person. I know for one, it would be people that have personality disorders. Sometimes those are individuals that struggle with that. And a lot of people have personality disorders, but not aware of it. And that's something that you want to get assessed for to determine if you do, so that you can learn how to respect other people's boundaries and set boundaries yourself as well. And people that struggle with chemical dependency sometimes are really difficult to set boundaries with. And I'm not going to go into a whole substance abuse sermon here, but you know, when people are really struggling with addiction, it really is hard for them to set boundaries. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, Dr. Duncan, but in my profession, I have quite a bit, and that can be problematic. And just people that are controlling, that have controlling tendencies, people that uh, don't like to allow other people to take the wheel every now and then. And so that could be that person. And sometimes that is a parent. I see a lot of parents that struggle with healthy boundaries with their children as they enter adulthood or as they get older as teens. They don't want to give them a little bit of privacy or give them a little bit of rope so they can go out and learn some things on their own before they leave home, and give the opportunity to teach those very valuable lessons that they need to learn at home before they leave. And so the rope is so tight, and then we, you know, launch them out into the world after they graduate from high school. And then sometimes, because they didn't really get to experience some things that maybe they should have, then they really struggle to survive outside of their homes. And so it's important that parents pay attention to whether or not they have healthy boundaries with their kids. I have literally seen adults in their 30s that still have a relationship with their parents as though they were 13, 14 years old, like not having a voice. Their parents, everything that they say that's not consistent with their parents' beliefs or what their parents want them to say, it's, you know, it's almost like that child still getting in trouble, or they're afraid to have their own perspective and opinion with their parents as a full grown adult. And it's not an easy thing to see for the person that's in that situation. They think that this is how I'm supposed to respect my mom or my dad. And that absolutely is not the case. You're supposed to respect your mom and dad,
Yes.
but you're supposed to also have a voice, and it's okay for you to have an opinion, and it's okay for you to disagree with your parents. That doesn't equate to disrespect.
I think that's real powerful that you just said that. To disagree doesn't mean it means to be disrespected. I think that, you know, such as using the words boundaries, I think using the word disrespect comes about pretty fast for people. You know, like if you're saying something that you're not in agreement with, then that person's perceived to be disrespecting you. Or if somebody has an opinion or is saying something from their perspective that may not align with the way that you saw the field or read the room, then it's being perceived as being disrespectful. I think that it's really important to try to seek out more information if it's humanly possible. If it's already to the point where it's escalatory, to the point where it's just best to disengage, go and do so. But fact finding really makes a big difference because we're not in each other's heads. We're not definitely not in each other's eyeballs, and we don't know what the other person is currently thinking at that particular moment when something happens. So seeking out information or you know, clarifying, you know, seek out clarification is really more important than assumptions. For some people who do listen to this podcast, they know that I'm a type of person that if something bothers me, I'm going to ask you immediately. I'm not going to wait 2 weeks after the fact or a week after the fact, whatever the case may be. So, I mean, if there's something going on and I'm starting to make an assumption and that assumption is starting to paint you in a particular light, I would rather ask you directly. And it's not being confrontational, but for me, it's just to clarify. I want to know, you know, what's going on with this. And if you don't want to speak on it, good. But, you know, I think that's better. I think that approach is a little bit more appropriate by saying, hey, Carmel, is everything good? You know, did I say something, you know, blah, 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 instead of waiting for weeks after the fact. Because then what happens is when you do get something maybe, you know, within a week or 3 weeks after the event occurred, it basically blindsides the individual and it creates another level of conflict, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's in real time.
Yes.
Deal with conflict in real time. That is important. Now, the only time that doesn't apply is if you're not regulated. If your emotions are not intact and you're not able to control whatever behavior response or maybe say words that are responsible, in that situation. Allow yourself time to calm down first before dealing with it. But you said something very powerful. You said, don't wait until weeks down the road, because then you have that buildup. The other thing, in today's society, we see people going on Facebook rants and such instead of going to that person. And very often, I think if we would just as a society learn to go to the person that we're having conflict with and deal with it with that person, rather than talking it out to a couple thousand people on Facebook that have no idea what's going on. And then it seems like a verbal attack or an emotional attack against the person that's reading it, that may know that you're talking about them, or even somebody that you're not even friends with on social media. It's not going to solve anything for you to do that. If anything, it's just going to make it worse. So just learn how to be okay with saying, I made a mistake. And when we talk about emotions, there are some socially acceptable emotions. Well, they're more so socially acceptable than others. And sometimes you hear people say that somebody's emotional. And usually when you refer to somebody as being emotional, it's typically somebody that's, sad, or that cries easily, that kind of has, as we used to call, soft feelings, right? But when you have that person that's always angry, always at odds with other people, and they are just out of control with their emotions, resentful towards other people, to me, that's a person that's sensitive, because there's very little control emotionally there. So we have to remember that anger it shouldn't be more acceptable than being sad or being afraid or saying that your feelings were hurt, that type of thing. They're all human emotions. We have to learn how to allow all of them and manage all of them.
Yeah, and I'll say this just for I guess just for a conversational sake, just really piggyback on what you're saying. As a Black male, I know that it's very difficult for those who are listening. And even if you're a woman listening to this, it's very difficult for Black men to be able to express themselves. We're not really raised or taught to emote. And so even when we do become into relations, even when we do enter into relationships, it's still difficult for us to emote at times, just the way that the constructs of society have been historically over the decades. And so if you're a male, Black male listening to this, and I'm just speaking from Black male perspective, so I don't know if white men or other ethnic groups have these issues, but
They
you know,
do.
they do. Okay. Well,
Yes.
men in general,
Men in
all my
general, yes.
brothers. Yeah, all my
Yes.
brothers who are listening, um,
Yes.
you know, seek out information first. And like Carmel has said, do it immediately. Don't build it up. And I know that we don't want to be like the bad person. We don't want to seem like that we're always, and I know feeling being a word sensitive can be kind of difficult to kind of accept, but we do have emotions, we do have feelings, and there's nothing wrong having emotions or feelings when somebody says something that we may not like or whatever the case may be. But if somebody does say something that makes you feel a certain type of way, whether male or female, ask for clarification, seek out, don't let it fester, basically. And I know that's sometimes I think that what happens, and maybe you've seen it with your clients, where a lot of that rage does come from because you've held that in for so many days, and you're just, just ruminating over it over and over again, and you're trying to have this conversation where you're trying to make sense out of what this other person's trying to say or do, but then all you have to do is just seek that clarification. I think that's really important. So there's nothing wrong having a conversation about things that you may feel that could be bothering you. And I think that the receiving party, whether it's a male or female, who do listen to you, if they have enough respect for you as a human being, as a person, they're going to listen to you. I mean, obviously, if you just keep doing it over and over again, people do get on each other's nerves. But I mean, but that's again, that's conflict, that's inevitable. But when it does come to key critical issues, don't be afraid to ask, for clarification. Don't be afraid to say, hey, this is not a good time for me to talk right now, or whatever the case may be. You don't have to put on a shield and a sword and fight every battle right away. Sometimes it's just best just to, you know, figure out what's going on and then process it. The one way that I know that I try to deal with conflict now is to, depending on certain issues, if it's egregious enough for me to where it really bothers me, I'm gonna ask you right away. And if it's not something that's not going to be classified as end of the world type issues, then I just kind of just let it roll and just say, chalk it up as saying that's Carmel being Carmel, or that's Butler being Butler, or whoever. Instead of saying Carmel's intentionally trying to to tick me off, or Carmel did this to hurt me, or whatever the case may be and stuff. And I think that's really important for men to hear that from, from another male perspective.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's important just to make sure that we think about from the male and the female perspective too, because hearing you say that really prompted me to think about Black females, the whole angry Black female thing that people refer to. And most often, when I have worked with African American females, and they have been seen as this angry person, most often it's not anger at all. It's anger is what they're displaying to protect themselves, but underneath there's a lot of pain most often, and they've been hurt most often multiple times by many people, and sometimes just multiple times by one person, but the damage has been so severe that they have to protect themselves. And so we have to be careful about making assumptions about what we see on the outer layer that people are actually displaying, and give people a little bit of grace and still ask them how they're doing, and don't take their overall demeanor personal. It just might be protection.
Yeah, could be protection, or you could have caught them in a bad moment. I always say that talked about the situation with one of my properties and stuff. 24 hours is a difference, right? And 24 hours, if the event happened 24 hours earlier, it would be a whole different animal compared to what happened then. And and it's the same thing even when you're dealing with people. It's like you just don't know. Somebody could have had some bad news and was processing it, and then you're coming in, heaping problems on top of their problems, and they may not be ready to process it. And so if that person usually is outgoing, engaging, or whatever the case may be, and they're having a moment, maybe just ask why, instead of making the assumption. If it's happening to the point where it seems like it's happening more frequency and stuff, and you know that this person all around, male or female, is a good person, meaning like they're courteous, they're kind, they're polite, patient, or whatever the case may be, seek clarification instead of making an assumption and stuff, because I think that's when you get to more dangerous territory, to what we led off this particular conversation today about setting boundaries, is that we are setting boundaries because of the fact that we're either permitting the behavior to continue unadulterated, and to the point where you just say that's enough, we're not seeking clarification, or we're just engaging in behavior that's just not healthy for us altogether.
Yeah. Where are your fences?
Where are your fences? I like that. That sounds like a t-shirt. Where are your fences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got some good t-shirt slogans every now and then. I just want to tell you that.
Hey, we need to start writing those down.
I know, right? I know. Well, it's on recording. It's just I don't know if we're going to go back and listen to it again. But, you know, but this is a great conversation. I think it was important. I know we had talked about doing it earlier, this particular conversation, but like I said, life got in the way. But one thing I do want to say is that I do very much not only appreciate you and Butler for doing the things that you have done, but one reason why I do the podcast with somebody else is because I like to hear that conversation. I think it's good to hear other people's viewpoints, and so just getting it on a time that's conducive for them is really important. So Butler and Carmel, they are the crew, and it feels like I just can't record without one or both of them together and stuff. So, but the fact that we have done this with some level of consistency over the last couple of years is really 3. Yeah, it has been 3 years. Oh my God, I know, right? Yeah, for these last 3 years, just to be able to do that, it's really powerful. And I know that personally, I know people have came up and say, when is the next time you're going to record? When's the next time you're going to record? And we're going to do that. We're going to, and I know I keep saying that and stuff, but we are going to do it. I know there's some good people to bring out here that's going to be engaged to different elements of the Mahogany Legacy Project and your exhilarating life. And we would love to have those people on there. It's because I think it's good for people to have relatability to certain subjects and just hearing professional insight. We're both professionals and we excel at what we do. And so, this is our way of giving, one of many ways that we give back to the community. And so we definitely appreciate that. So before we go, anything on the horizon that you have going on you would like to share with the audience, any kind of projects or whatever people may want to just kind of know what's in the world of Queen Carmel?
Well, I'm keynote speaker next week at the Southern Conference for the Illinois Counseling Association. So if you are a therapist or aspiring therapist or a student working in some program that's going to lead to being a therapist, come over to the Southern Conference. It's on March 24th. Starts early in the morning at like 8:30 a.m. You can register online at ilcounseling.org. So that's the Illinois Counseling Association's page. So I'd love to have you to join us.
Absolutely. And tomorrow, I will be doing, I will get this up tonight, but tomorrow, I will be doing a business planning webinar. It's going to be one of many open sessions I'll have. To me, again, engagement, giving back to the community. Um, I sit on several boards such as Carmel, and we find out where these issues are. And I think that we have a moral obligation to try to find ways to give back to it. We also understand that it's challenging for some people to be able to invest in those type of services. And so, it's a way to try to give back. So we are also a member of the Metro East Black Wealth Builders, and so we are trying to in the southern part of Illinois to really provide a collective of individuals, regardless of faith, profession, financial interest, or whether an entrepreneur or not. We want to make sure that we provide a holistic experience and just introduce people to support other businesses and just get, very valuable information. So like this business planning webinar is part of that. Kiara Lewis and Kim with Cafe Biz, they're having something on March the 23rd, a networking mixer. So hopefully those in the area are able to participate. And I'm really excited about the energy that they provide. I know Devin Moody Graham, she has like 5,000 things going on, and I say that in love, but I always follow her and stuff because she does have something going on. I think she got something going on this Thursday, matter of fact, but I'm watching basketball. So Devin, if you're hearing this, basketball comes more, it's more important right now.
I've
But
got your back, Devin. I'm watching. I'm going to tune
yeah, I'm
in.
just
Is it
saying,
online? Is it virtual? Because
you
I'm not a
know,
sports person. I'm such a disappointment as a co-host with when it comes to sports. am so not the sports. Now I do go to live games. Like I can do live games, but I don't watch it on TV. So
Nah, it's you know what? So I get that from my dad. My dad was always big into sports. And so it's funny and stuff because my sister gets into certain sports. My brother he's a big Buffalo Bills fan. Yeah, huge, huge, huge Buffalo Bills fans. And he loves football and he'll watch, some sports every now and then, but not to the degree that like I do. I like, people joke and say like if you want to find me, I'm probably in somebody's sports bar watching the game. It's just I don't know, it's just always something I've got into, and to me, it's the best reality show, and it's a good escape, Um,
yeah.
but but NCAA tournament, that's just something that I have been involved in as far as long as I was a kid, since UNLV, the Running Rebels and the Fab Five, and it's just really a great experience for me. I've been to numerous games, and so it's just one of those things and stuff where you can go to any sports bar or restaurant in the country, and you just got people just glued to the game. And this is even well before sports betting has been legalized in a lot of states. So it's always a fun time of the year. Somebody they used to, his mom, or actually my son's old bowling teammate's mom, we always hook up at least one of the days for this week, or yeah, this is March Madness week, one of the days this week. And so I usually catch up with her somewhere and we'll watch the game for a couple of hours. And it's almost kind of like a tradition now and stuff. So she'll always send me a message like, hey T, I'm this and this and that and stuff with my friends. I'll just come there for like an hour and two, watch the games because she's into it as much as I am. And it's a cool experience and stuff. But yeah, I know that I went to this tech thing last week at T-Rex. That was interesting. And for those who are interested in seeing how the tech world or startups and stuff go to, I think it's important. Even if it's not something that you're totally aligned to, I think that just trying different things and being exposed to different spaces is really fun. You meet new people, you interact with different folks, and you just learn a lot more about yourself, about what your interests truly are and stuff. So I think that's pretty cool as well. But great show today. I appreciate you guys listening on Spotify, iTunes, and everything else that these podcasts are uploaded to, or if you're watching this on YouTube, whenever, we appreciate it as well. And hopefully, if you are a therapist, you come out and see Queen Carmel as a keynote. I'm definitely excited, about that for you. And I know you got so many other bright things coming up and opportunities in the future, as always. And thank you for being a leader in the community.
Likewise.
Absolutely. So we are closing the show. It is now March the 13th, 5:35 p.m. I keep saying that because you know why? I'm a dissertation chair, and when I record my dissertations, I always have to say the date and time. And so that's why I
Mm.
said the date and time. So that's just a little tidbit about myself. But anyways, thank you for listening, everybody. I hope y'all have a blessed rest of the week, and we will get back online within the next couple of weeks. So thank you again for listening. Bye bye.
Bye.